What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Get Paid for Your Pad. Today we have a special guest. He's been on the podcast before about a year and a half ago in May 2023. He's one of our favorite students because he always takes action, and we love people that take action. So welcome back to the show, Derek Gisriel.
Thank you. It is great to be back, and a lot has happened since May of 2023. So excited to go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited to get some updates from you. I know you're crushing it in many different ways. But why don't we kick it off? Why don't you give us a quick recap of your journey since you started your company a couple of years ago?
Sure. So when I started all of this, I had a full-time W-2 position. I was a part owner in a residential solar company, and we always knew we wanted to be in real estate. But as you know, there's so many different ways that you can go, right? You can do mobile home parks, self-storage, commercial real estate, long-term rentals. The options are endless. We liked the improvement aspect of short-term rentals, and we like the hospitality aspect, the guest experience, which maybe we could dive into a little bit today. But we bought our first house. That was in October of 2022. It's a 5-bedroom house in a very small, remote, very old school, in a lot of different ways, vacation rental market outside of San Antonio, Texas. And that house in its best year did $64,000 a year. We got about 10 years of history when we closed on that from the previous owner. And what we did is we just did a small 49-day remodel, not knocking down walls, just a redesign, highlighting the amenities, did some paint, new furniture, and really just showed the property in its best light. And then what we did is we got that live at the end of 2022. So that first year we did, but there was, last few weeks of the year, we did about $1,388 in overall revenue. The first actual year, so 2023, we did about $160,000 out of that house. So almost tripled the revenue. And then from that point, last year, we closed the books at 190. And we learned a lot on the way, right along the way. And since then, we have purchased 2 more properties in that neighborhood, in that community. One's a 5 and a 6-bedroom house, both new construction, that are doing very well. And then we launched Level Up Property Management because we had owners coming to us to say, hey, you took the income from 64 to 160 the first year. Can you help us? We don't care to do it on our own, or, we have a property manager that maybe we're not happy with. So we started Level Up there in the summer of 2023. So it's just been about a year and a half-ish. And we're currently at 26 properties that are live with the goal to hit 50 by the end of this year. Year 1, we did about 1,400 on Airbnb. Year 2, we did about 160, and last year we crested the $1 million mark with our properties. So great first, initial growth.
Awesome, amazing, man. Yeah, last time you were in the podcast, we talked a lot about the experience, right? I feel like that's something that you really nailed from the get-go of how do we create the best possible guest experience, right? From when they open the door, what do they smell? What do they see? What are they hearing? And you really nailed it there. I remember that very well. And, for everybody who's listening now, if you want some inspiration, look up that podcast. It was in May 2023. So I'll look up the name as we get through the interview, so it's easy for people to look up. But what I wanted to talk about today is something that I've noticed with you is you were in our Legends X program, and we had this thing called Property Abundance Plan where we were helping people to create a schedule, content creation schedule for marketing, right? And we see with most of our students, they, in the beginning, they're excited and they start doing it. But then eventually, it takes a lot of effort to do it consistently, right? And so a lot of them eventually kind of fall off the bandwagon, or they start doing something else. But you've been like so consistent. I see your Instagram reels and posts like every week. There's a few new ones. I just Googled your name. I was looking for the podcast we did in May, and it's like, man, there's like 10 pages of like Derek Gisriel all over YouTube and Instagram and all over all over the place. So, what I want to talk about with you is like how do you like take such consistent action? Like what's different with your mindset than most other people? Can you touch on that?
Yeah, so I think, with the property abundance plan kind of outlining, what to post, that gave me like a rough draft, so to speak. And then obviously it's up to you to fill it in, but more importantly, it's up to you to like remain consistent to your audience, right? And I have a coach that I've worked with for quite a while, and he put a post out on Instagram the other day, but it's so true. It's like, right now we're recording this. It's the 21st of January, and he said, it's quitting season. So like everyone has like all of these high expectations and lofty goals for the year, and then most people like lucky to make it to like week 3, and then they kind of fall off the bandwagon and just give it up. And what I'll share with you, it certainly will never be perfect, and you'll forget to work out or forget to record, or you've got something that came up. What's worked really well for me and for us at Level Up is just the consistency to the planning aspect of it. So I'm very old school, like, kind of handwritten calendar type of thing, but just planning out the week every week on a Sunday. And like, what does the week look like? Like, for us, who's dropping off the kids, who's picking them up, and then you've got a huge gap in between, to fill. And you can fill it with everything or nothing. And so for us, taking a look at the content creation, we've made that a pretty big aspect of it. I think that there's so much information out there. Information is free. It's like the implementation is really what you end up paying for, right? So to schedule it out for the week ahead of what are the big rocks, like what are the big priorities that will help move the business forward? Like what are the top 3 things that are like my business non-negotiables? What are my top 3 like personal non-negotiables that have to get done, like no matter what, come Sunday at 12 p.m. or whatever that looks like, right? And so for me, like the content creation looks like about every 3 weeks I'll block off half a day and just record. And what I've now shifted, I used to do a lot of like short reels and like 30 seconds and 1 minute, but now what we've shifted to is more long form content. So like YouTube, because what we believe is, I think that our owner avatar that we're chasing lives in there, because like they want to be the forefront of like what's happening in the short-term rental space, or they have properties that maybe they haven't considered moving to, short-term rent or whatnot. They're just real estate investors. So if we can put what we know out there, like all of our tips and all of our strategies and like everything that we do on a daily basis, I hope that it helps someone, right? And maybe they're doing it themselves and they'll never hire us, and like that's fine. I hope it helps. But ultimately, I think that our strategy is now shifting to more knowledge based and like sharing what we know, like what we've learned in Legends X, what we've learned along the way, and really just sharing that knowledge and being generous with it ultimately.
And you know what? Like that whole the scheduling and the blocking out time and everything. I think there's a lot of people that will do that, but then there comes a moment where you just don't feel like it. You have to record yourself, and you're like, oh, I gotta record like 6 reels, and it's like, oh man, I didn't sleep well, and I'm not feeling confident today. Like I don't really want to be on camera. Have you had those moments, or are you just like a superhuman?
All the time, right? And look, like sometimes when you plan out the week and you say, hey, it's going to happen on Tuesday at 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., it gets pushed to Wednesday or whatever. The kids are sick. This happens, that happens, that, stuff happens. But I would say like that doesn't mean that it's necessarily like a failure. And it's just like, it's kind of like if you're on a diet, like, okay, well, you fell off the bandwagon for a day. Like that doesn't mean you're gaining 20 pounds of fat tomorrow, right? So you get to turn it around. And I think just recognizing that aspect of it has been helpful, and just like, hey, like not a problem. It's done that. And the second thing that's really helped a lot is just doing a long form content, because I can get up here and then just speak on a topic like guest experience for 10 or 15 minutes. And then my social media team can then chunk it down to like, okay, we can make 20 reels out of like this one video. So it's not like the stop start, like what's the script, like it doesn't wear you down. Like you're just speaking to what and to like, an agenda, right? Ultimately.
Yeah. And these days it's getting a little easier to kind of create and repurpose content with all the AI tools. I mean, even this, this software that we're using to record this podcast right now, it's called Riverside FM. And there's so much AI integration in this tool already, to the point where you can press a button and it'll bust out like 20 reels for you, right? And then you still have to kind of listen to them and make some edits and make sure that it's cohesive and it doesn't break off at the wrong time. But there's a lot of tools out there now that kind of make that process a little easier. But I think So you do have those moments where you're like, I don't feel like it, and you might postpone it, but then you get back into it. Like maybe you fall off the bandwagon, but then you get back on it, right? So is that really the trick of like not giving up, and just even if you miss a couple times, like you just don't get discouraged and you just jump back on the wagon?
Like I think that I still believe this from a mentor once told me this a long time ago. It's like, the hardest part is showing up, right? Like you show up, give yourself the grace, like just put in the 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever, just get started, like whatever that next step looks like. Inevitably, you'll probably find yourself just finishing it. It's like working out. Like you just, all right, let me hop on the bike. Let me hop on the Peloton for 5 minutes. And like next thing you know, it's 30, 45 minutes, right? And it's done.
Right.
It's out of the way, right? So, I think like it's just getting started, and it's putting, one foot in front of the other and just, keep it going. Like that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I used to, what I used to do to get myself to do things, especially like with going to the gym. I was living in Panama for a couple of years, and we had a gym in our building. But, you wake up and you're like, I don't really feel like going to the gym. So one thing I learned from, I can't remember who it was, but that person told me, you know what, let's just put the bar very low. Just tell yourself, like, the only thing I have to do is actually go there, right? I don't have to do anything at the gym, but I need to put up my shorts, jump in the elevator, and just make it to the gym. And that's all that's all expectations that I'll put on myself. But then once you're there, you're not going to just turn around and go back, because you kind of feel very silly if you do that, right? So then once you're at the gym, you're like, okay, well, let me do one exercise at least, and then it's like, well, I could do one more. And then, but if I tell myself, okay, I have to bust my beep, like for an hour, then I'm not going to go, because I'm like, I don't want to, I want to do that for an hour. But if I just have to show up, okay, yeah, I can show up, and we'll see. Anything on top of that is bonus, and that's a good strategy, because it creates consistency, right?
And I would say, like, ultimately you have to choose your hard, right? Like it's hard to work out. It's hard to wake up early. It's hard to make content, but it's like, it's also hard to like be overweight, like, or, be unhealthy or have like health issues, or, not be as successful if you did X, Y, and Z. So like, ultimately, like by not choosing it, you're choosing something else, like by default, right? So like you're at a fork in the road. It's ultimately up to you, like what's your hard, and like how do you want to define it? And then that goes like into like your your ultimate goals, like what you set out for the year. Lauren and I, right before January 1st, the last weekend of December, we went out to an amazing like Airbnb short-term rental, like kind of community that they developed. They're like small little, it's called Onera, in the Texas Hill Country. And they're maybe, I don't know, 600 square foot kind of houses that overlook the Wimberley Valley. And they've got hot tubs, which are sunk into the balcony. You don't really see anyone else. And we use that like to plan out our entire year, 2025. And it was really nice just to have peace and quiet, where you could think clearly. And it was, very calming. But planning out your goals, like whether that's for the year or the week or the month, like then backing that out and saying, all right, like what do I need to do in order to hit that goal for the month, right? And chunk it down like that makes it a little bit more digestible than just like, okay, great, like we got to get to 50 this year, but like what does that look like on a daily basis?
Mm-hmm. Right. And by the way, that Onera property is a property that we've been following for a while, and it's going to inspire us as well for Freewyld. And
amazing.
Yeah, I'm jealous, man. Like I would love to stay there. Anybody who wants to check it out, it's stayonera.com. Oh, incredible place. Where is it? In Fredericksburg?
So they have
Wimberley,
Fredericksburg,
Texas.
and then they've got Wimberley. Wimberley is a small little town in the Texas Hill Country, and property values have been shooting up like crazy. Got a small little downtown area. River runs through it. It's a great location they chose because of the views. The views are amazing. Sunset's amazing, but it's just maybe 4 minutes from like downtown Wimberley. So like, you could be like alone in peace and quiet, or you could be in the shops and coffee shops and restaurants and kind of in the mix of things like pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Really amazing development, very well thought out, and served a great purpose for us. And I think like moving forward, we'll do these like retreats every year and find like somewhere in the world that's like quiet and allows for that thought process to go, but then also inspiring. Like you want to wake up and like see the view, and it's like, wow, like, this is really inspiring.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we're doing those offsites like 3 or 4 times a year. And to your point, it's really good to go to like a spot where you're not reminded of like the daily grinds, right? So not your office or not your house, like get out and go somewhere else where you can kind of forget about all the daily hustle and bustle and really think big and think high level and creative, let the creative juices flow. So I love that. One thing I wanted to ask you is, you started late 2022, right? So you've really only been in business for 2 years, just over 2 years, right? You've grown from your very first property to now, was it 26 properties that you 26? So that's the impressive growth, right? I mean, to bust out an entire business managing 26 units in 2 years is pretty incredible. What are some of the biggest learning lessons, and what are some things that you would have done differently looking back?
Yeah, I'd say like, look, I think that we all, as a business owners, if you just have one house, like you're still a business owner, right? Like you ultimately live and die by reviews. So, it's on our team, it's Lauren, who's my wife, and me, and we have an executive assistant. She works remote in El Salvador. And, our culture is like 5-star or nothing. And like this past year, we hosted 6,600 guests and then landed a 99.6% 5-star review rating, like on the OTAs. And, there was some tough like situations, like inevitably stuff goes wrong, as you know. You got HVAC issues, you have pool issues, pool heater issues, and things just happen, right? Things just happen. And I would say that the sword that you fall on, like you've got to own that mistake, number one. But I think that if you are personalizing like the stay for the guest, that goes a long way. It goes a long way. Like if they open the door and it smells amazing, it smells like a Ritz-Carlton, Marriott, Hilton, their name is on the TV, their personalized name with a custom guidebook QR code with the Wi-Fi information and the weather. Digital guidebook is delivered at the time of check-in and previous to that through automation. And then there's a handwritten note, on the entry table. At that point, things go wrong, yes, but then what I think is they've realized like, okay, like Derek and Lauren are actually real people and they care. Like it's not just like some, corporate entity that owns thousands of these and like we're just a number. So, I think that that's helped us a lot. And I think we go back and forth on this, and I've researched a lot of different strategies, but I think, I'm a firm believer that if something goes wrong, whether, it's in your control or not, you probably got to eat it somewhere on the money side of things, from my experience. And whether that's refunding the cleaning fee, whether that is, refunding a day or 2 days or like whatever the situation is, let's say the pool heat fee, whatever that is, right? You've got to like show them also that like, look, something went wrong. We acknowledge it and like, we're going to fix it. But also like, here's, some money back. And I'm on many like forums and short-term rental masterminds. And I think that's a point where it goes two ways, like where, well, we fixed it, so like they shouldn't get anything back. And it's like, even if you fix it, like, is the 5-star review, is it worth it? Right. And so, although it doesn't guarantee a 5-star review by any means, it just depends on the situation. But, that's something that when we were in Legends X, like it was something like, look, if you mess up or something goes wrong, like it should be something to the point where you feel that sting a little bit, whether that's the cleaning fee or something else. Like you feel that sting because like you're doing what's right for the guest, and I think ultimately, like they're coming back, right? They're going to come back. And they're gonna book it again, and spend more money, spend more time, and make it right for the guests.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I mean, what we see, especially on Airbnb, is there's a huge divide happening, or the gaps widening between the top performing listings, right? The listings with hundreds of 5-star reviews and the guest favorite badge, versus the listings that have like a 4.5, 4.6, 4.7. But now Airbnb even has a little badge that shows like if you're on the top, the lower 10% of listings, they'll actually put a little badge. It's a little hidden. It's a bit further down the page. They don't stick it right at the top. But, like if you're in like the lower 20, 30% of performing listings, like it's really hard to get traction. It's very hard to get traction.
Yes.
Guests are expecting more. The novelty of just staying in an Airbnb is kind of worn off. Like everyone's stayed in an Airbnb by now. So now it's really like expectations are going up. And yeah, we have to take that really serious, and we have to really like put the guest interest first. And I hear you on the discussions, because sometimes it's also feels a little unfair to the host. Sometimes you feel like guests are kind of making up some issues that might not really be there in order to, trying to get a refund. And there's a lot of talk around that. But, like, I think in the end of the day, if we just focus on that guest experience, and if we make a mistake, we got to own up to it and we got to fix it. Right. And yeah. To your point, like it has to hurt a little bit because we need to be motivated to improve as well. Right. So I think that's a really good mindset to have. And you're absolutely right. It pays off like long term. Like, I would say like there's an expression like you can win the battle, you lose the war, and that I think applies very much to like how we deal with our guests, right? Like yes, maybe we are right sometimes, and we can win that battle with the guests, but then like are we going to win the war? And I think by just putting the guest interest first, I think over time it's a win-win because I mean, to your point, like 6,600 reviews and having a 99.6% 5-star reviews. That's incredible. I mean, there are very, very few companies that can say that, right? And that's a huge credibility and trust builder, especially now that guests are seeking higher quality listings, seeking higher quality experience. Airbnb is pushing really for quality, right? So I think that's a winning formula.
Yeah, and in our first 90 days, once we'll build the listing, professional photos, optimize it, get it live, like out to the marketplace. Like our first 90 days, we call it the stabilization period, because you're testing the market, you're finding the market really, and you're at a double-edged sword because you need 5-star reviews, but the problem is you don't have 5-star reviews, right? And so people don't necessarily trust, that this is not a scam or whatever, right? Even though you may be a super host or whatnot. In order to do that, what we tell our owners is like, look, the first 90 days is not necessarily about breaking records. That will come. We will break average daily rate records and occupancy records and RevPAR records. But the first 90 days is really laying the groundwork and paving the way of success. And at the end of 90 days, like, we want that property to have a guest favorite badge on Airbnb. And in order to do that, we have to get people to stay there, and we have to get them to leave, 5-star reviews, right? And so we have a very quick ramp up period in the first 90 days. And how do you fill the calendar, and how do you, show that it's a good value? You sometimes need to compress rates. And that puts you in the 15th to 20th percentile of the market. But ultimately, that initial little hit on the revenue and the income is going to pay way more dividends once you get that guest favor badge. You now have the social proof to even charge, what's competitive in the marketplace. And then that's when we start breaking the records and building upon that success there.
Yeah, 100%. It's focus on the bigger picture, right? Not on just trying to make as much money as possible in the first month. I think that's a great strategy. That's what we use as well. Very, very similar strategy. I want to touch on that. So last week we were on a call, right, in a mastermind, right? And we were sharing some tips on revenue management, because that's all we are focused on right now is revenue management. And we were sharing that we were getting some good results with length of stay discounts on Airbnb, right? And you took action on the call, and that's why that's what I was saying earlier. Is like I always see you just taking action right away, right? And maybe you can share what happened on that call.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I think I messaged you after that meeting was worth, about $10,000 to that 1 hour meeting. I think ultimately there's so much information out there. If you don't implement any of it, then nothing happens. You just stay status quo, right? But essentially, what we took a look at is, I took a look into Price Labs. We use length of stay discounts heavily. I think actually in our meeting with our Airbnb market manager, something like over 70% of all of our bookings have some kind of length of stay incentive to secure that booking. And it works great to help fill the calendar, fill the gaps. But it also incentivizes them to increase that length of stay. Whereas normally they would go let's say in the winter where it's off season, they would book a Friday and Saturday checkout Sunday. But if you can incentivize them, let's just call it, 20% to add that extra day, that incremental more day in occupancy, RevPAR, overall revenue. That's what separates the winners from the losers, is that extra few days here and there and here and there. And you're adding that up over the course of a year. And that's how you have an incredible year. That's how you beat the market, right? And so in that meeting, one of the things we took a look at is in Price Labs. I mean, as you know, there's tons of different little tweaks you can change in there. but one of them was the profile, right? And it looks at aggressive, super aggressive, normal. And on the call, like as I was listening to everyone and you, I changed some of our properties that we own, the big houses, 6 bedrooms, and I changed them to aggressive or super aggressive. And so what that does is, like, in the low times, it will lower the rate, right? So because we want to scrape anything that we can. And then in the summertime, which is our peak season, it will raise, the cap, right? Raise the bar. And we had the highest average daily rate booked, which was over $1,900. And to give you perspective, RevPAR, like in that month, was, about half of what we secured, that booking at. It was like a $7,000 booking, and then I got off the call, and then another, $2,000 booking came in, same property. So, ultimately it's like learn, but more importantly, pivot, take action. Like, is it going to help or not? And like that feedback loop, like, well, keeps you in the top, right?
Yeah. 100%. No, it's 100% right. Like that extra little effort of just learning, implementing, testing, and seeing what happens versus like what we call the set it and forget it hosts, who kind of turn on their price labs, sort of wheelhouse or whatever tool they're using, and they're just kind of letting it run. It's a huge difference, right? And right now, like that's we have to be like very hands-on with our revenue management because the market's not really growing. Like the market's pretty flat.
Yeah.
And it's been pretty flat for a couple of years. So where do we find that extra revenue? It's like put more attention to your revenue management. You can't just let it run anymore. And investing in amenities is something that last week I was at a conference, and there's a lot of talk about how do we invest in amenities, but not like super expensive amenities, but at like a couple games that you can play in the backyard or something, to just elevate an experience without breaking the bank. So these are some ways that you can still increase your revenue year over year without the market actually like growing, right? So
yeah.
amazing,
And,
man.
ultimately,
Amazing.
it's like I spoke with an owner in one of our target markets, and it's a big house. It's like an 8-bedroom house. And, in year one, he did like 75,000. In year two, 60,000. Last year, 55,000. In the same market, we have a 5-bedroom house, much, much smaller, right? And that property did, over 80,000 last year. And so I said, look, house looks great. Photos, they were decent. But they were slammed with, essentially it was just mismanaged, right? It's mismanaged. And, when you're sitting at a 4.6 or a 4.74 or, kind of that land of mediocrity, I said, look, like you personally with your family, when is the last time that you went and booked a stay that was rated a 4.2? Or a 4.7. Like, you probably didn't, right? You sort by the highest normally, right? On the rating side. And if you did, you probably weren't thrilled about it, right? It probably wasn't like, oh, yes, I can't wait to show up to this home that has a 4.5 rating. Like, the land of mediocrity is where people die, right? And so we computed out that just because the revenue management wasn't dialed in, they had summer pricing, winter pricing, holiday pricing, and the reviews aspect, their previous PM was not a super host and their ratings weren't that good on the listing. He missed out over the course of 3 years, probably $100,000 to $150,000 just in missed revenue. And like, when you talk about like partnering with the right property management company, or, co-host, or you're doing it yourself, it's like, what's the gap, right? Like the cost of you not knowing, $150,000, right? Which is the difference for him between losing money and like breaking even or making money, where he doesn't have to, work overtime to help pay the mortgage on a rental house, right? So focusing on the guest experience and on the revenue side of things, like ebbing and flowing with the market, like the market's not going to come to you, right? You've got to go find the market and deliver a great value.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is like the gap is widening, right? The gap is widening between the non-professionally managed Airbnbs and the professionally managed Airbnbs.
And we love
Before
that. Like we really love that because it's fun for us. 90% of our listings, our guest favorite and the rest are just because they're being stabilized, right? First 90 days, they're like new listings. So it's like, it's fun. Once you are in that position where you've got all the 5-star reviews, like your listing is rocking, like occupancy is high, revenue's flowing in, like that's where it becomes like fun, right? Because like you're picking up those bookings and, your neighbor or the person that's not doing it right, like is not, ultimately.
Yeah, 100%. Before I let you go, can you share where people could find you? I'd love for people to kind of take a look at your YouTube and your Instagram and your website, because there's just so much, I think, inspiration from there. You've just executed so well on those aspects. So yeah, why don't you let people know where they can find you?
So Instagram is Derek, Derek, last name Gisriel, Gis as in Sam, Riel, and then YouTube channel is Level Up Stays, and our website is stay, STAY, levelup.com. And it's got all my contact information in there. And our channel, like on YouTube, is, like we're not trying to sell anything. It's literally like everything that we know and we do day to day across all of our portfolio. And, the intent is to like help people get better. Like ultimately we grow as an industry if we provide a better experience for a guest, because what we know is if a guest shows up to an Airbnb, it's terrible, it wasn't clean, it's not a great guest experience, that will burn in their mind. And they're going to tell everyone, right? And it becomes like a vanilla envelope of like, Airbnb, like inconsistency, right? And what I'll share is like, look, that's one of the things that hotels, love them or hate them, they do fairly decent. They're fairly consistent. And, our goal is to help other owners have that consistency. And if they don't want to do it themselves, they don't care. And, we've got the property management side.
One last question. I'm looking at your YouTube channel, and your thumbnails are really good, and you have like different emotions in your face, like on the thumbnails and stuff. Like, tell me about that. Like, you having fun with that? Like, you're standing in the mirror and like doing different faces, or how does that work?
Yeah. So, my social media manager, he was like, look, we need thumbnails, like you need different poses, these type of things. And so, I got a new camera, which is what I'm shooting on. It's a Canon. And so I told Lauren, I said, here's this, let me, I'm just going to do different like poses, different facial expressions and things like that. So then can you just take my photo as I do that? So, we did a little like impromptu, like 15 minutes photo shoot and send them to him, and he edits it and does the thumbnails and everything. And they're off in the wild now.
Amazing. I'm sure you're having fun with that. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. It's been awesome to catch up, and congrats on your achievements. You deserve it because you're putting in the effort, man. You're putting in the effort, and that's incredible.
Thank you. And I would say like also it's for anyone out there that's just kind of like doing this alone, or they're not really sure, like become a part of a community that has people like that are inspiring to you and that can help you. Like, because what I do and like what we do, like this is not something that we just like invented. We've in a lot of ways perfected the process and we've documented it and we're consistent. Yes. But like there's people in Part of Legends X and in other communities that they've been there. Right. And so like, if you lean on them to, instead of trying to figure it out yourself, that's huge. And then the second thing is like, you see people like we're at 26 properties, but you see people with like hundreds of properties. Wow. Like that's inspiring. Right. So like whatever that is for that person, like I would definitely urge to jump in some kind of community where you can lean on other people, but you're not just alone and trying to figure it out by yourself.
100%. Yeah, I mean, it's hard enough. Building a business is hard enough, and the short-term rental business is arguably a pretty complicated business to build because there's a lot of aspects to it. There's moving parts. It's 24/7, so it's not easy. It's definitely it's hard enough with the support of a community, let alone like trying to figure everything out yourself, right? And one way that you can, if you're listening to this and you want some support, one thing that you can do is you can go to freewildfoundry.com/ACP and you can get a free training on how to leverage Airbnb custom promotions. Okay, so this is completely free. You'll leave your email. You get on our email list as well. We'll send out like weekly emails, or a couple times a week we'll send you an email with some tips and tricks as well. So freewildfoundry.com/ACP is where you can get that training, and that way you can kind of connect with our community. So with that said, Derek, thanks again, man. I'm sure we'll have you back at some point. And to the listeners, thank you for listening. Again, we will be publishing every Monday and Friday going forward after we took a couple months off from the podcasting, but we are full of energy and excitement to be back into this. So with that said, thanks everybody, and we'll see you next time.